Hi, it's Marty from the Accelerator team here at Robson Laidler, and today I'm joined by Sarah Callender from Duo Global Consulting. Hi Sarah.
Hi Martin.
We're going to talk today about effective performance management, and the reason for this is Sarah and her team delivered some internal training for us recently. I thought it was pretty good. We'll do 20 minutes or so on that. And I suppose the first thing is you talk about performance management. The starter is you need a team that's motivated, don't you?
Yeah.
Is how do you figure out, how do you get people motivated?
It's such a big subject, and a subject that we do a lot of stuff on, because particularly during COVID times, there's been a lot of change over the last few sort of years, and motivation levels have varied across that period of time. And typically they'll go through spikes where motivations are really high. But when you're performance managing, you really, to be a good manager, if you can understand what motivates your team members, you are much more likely to drive up their productivity, their effectiveness, but also to engage with them so that their energy levels are high. Yeah. So you want to spot when they're not, and you want to be able to differentiate between, is it a motivational issue or is it a skills issue? So we call that, is it a can't?
Yeah.
Or, is it a won't?
Can they not do it, or will they not do it?
Absolutely.
So can't and won't is the... Yeah.
And typically, I think we talked about this in the session we did. Sometimes when someone's really experienced, you assume it's not a skills issue. You assume it's because they mustn't be motivated because obviously they've been in a role for a long period of time. But actually sometimes it is because maybe something's changed, or that they don't want to ask for help, or they don't want to be seen to
New software, it could be anything, couldn't it?
Absolutely. So sometimes that skills piece is really important for you to look at. Is it a skills issue? And if it is, usually you'll be able to tell, is it something that's lacking in the work? If it's a motivational issue, so if it's a can't, it can be for lots of different reasons. But to spot that, it's like looking and saying, actually, has someone's energy levels dipped? Has something changed? Sometimes
could this be as simple as they used to smile when they came in and say hi to everyone? They don't now.
Yeah.
You've got to spot differences in behaviour, haven't you?
Absolutely, behaviour and body language tell you a lot. And now I'm back in the office a bit more. This stuff's a bit more visible. I think when people were working from home, it was much more difficult to detect.
That's interesting. Do you think it was easier to put your game face on for that half-hour Teams catch-up? You can't blag a whole day sitting in a room with someone, can you?
Absolutely, and also you can't pick up everything from this bit that you can say on a video call. So, and people's motivations will change. Sometimes we talk about bulletproofing your day. So thinking about what gives you energy at the start of the day and varying your task and things. But from a performance management perspective, if someone is underperforming and you're their manager, you need to get to the root cause of what's causing that. Is it because, is it a motivation? Is it a skills? But also, what do you need to do in order to act on that? What does the person need to do? And they need to be driving the bus themselves, Yeah. So a manager, when we do sort of leadership management training, that is it's your job to spot that, but it's also your job to empower the other person to do something about it. So whether that's professional development, whether it's a conversation around what they need to do in a an upskilling perspective, work shadowing, and if it's motivational, you really need to look. So there's 3 ways that people are generally motivated when we look at people's behaviours.
Yeah.
So there's, we call it affiliation. That means that people are more motivated by people. So
team player, they want to be part of something.
Yeah. Sense of belonging, having an impact on someone else. So that really is the bit that will make them light up and want to get out of bed in the morning. The second one is, it's called power, but we don't make the names of these are behavioural, meta programs. But power is where someone is really motivated by taking control, having a lead, being responsible. Now, if you've got that in you and you've got no ownership,
you've got no control over how you do your task, when you do your task.
Absolutely. Yeah. Or if you haven't been given a project to manage, often these people like to be seen to be taking a lead. So it's really...
So they want to be the operator of the machine, not a cog in a machine.
Potentially. Yeah. And even with junior people, you can give them a little bit that and make them feel like it's theirs if you can't give them a full project or a full service to manage. And that's really important. If they don't feel like they've got any of that, their motivation levels will dip. And the third one is achievement. And this is interesting. So it can be achievement as in like academic accolade, or a progression route, or it could be just an achievement as in I've hit my targets, my KPIs, I'm doing well, and they're being recognised for that.
Yeah.
So
because the achievement without the recognising of that, it needs to be recognised, doesn't it? Is the way that I should have asked that question.
Yeah.
It's like they can know that they've hit it, but if they think nobody cares that they've hit it, well, again, that can be demotivating, can't it?
Absolutely.
So why did I bother?
Yeah, and they'll potentially feel undervalued. And sometimes, as a manager, and you'll know this with managing people, it's not that it hasn't been recognised, we just sometimes forget to say it or acknowledge it in the moment.
Yeah.
Or you, to be honest with you, we're just so bloody busy that we forget that bit's important. So, and if you're not motivated in the same way, so say if it was you and I, and we were both motivated by achievement, the likelihood is we'd be more likely to talk about that stuff. But if we're motivated differently, I'm affiliate and your achievement, I'll be talking about the people stuff, and you'll be talking about the targets and career progression, or how you've managed to get a client to do X.
We'll almost be having two different conversations, won't we? We'll not necessarily realise that we've got a different emphasis to the conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what it is, you know, if you can adjust your style, one style does not fit all, one communication method does not fit everybody. So, you know, a lot of the stuff we do with managers is around them being able to understand how to communicate better with the other person, and that might have to alter if you're then managing a different person. Well, it will have to alter. So really being able to flex that to get win-win interactions with both sides.
What's the danger of getting this wrong then, Sarah? So if we've got can't and won't, we can work on the won't to motivate people, we can train people on the can't, but I presume there's slightly different results if you fail on each of these, or does it all just end up with a demotivated person where you'll probably fall out because you think they're a bad employee?
Yeah, and I'm simplifying the motivation and skills. There's often other things get thrown into the mix. You know,
because there's stuff outside of work as well, isn't there? We're talking about the interaction at work largely here, presumably. Absolutely.
You know, there can be one person. I always believe that. Yeah, you can bring in your professional persona at work, and your personal life is outside of that, but you are one person, and you've got to kind of understand that there might be external factors impacting people's performance, but it's about opening up the communication. It's about really recognising people's behaviours, and has there been a change in that, and I think like instigating conversation, you know.
This is an accountancy practice. We you know, that doesn't come easy for a lot of people.
It doesn't, and I think, and I can say this, having worked with you for a number of years, that you've got a lot of really sort of open-minded people who really want to create a great culture, so you work at this really hard, but there are a lot of businesses that don't sort of recognise the value of this, and they see it as like soft skills or the pink and fluffy stuff, but actually there's nothing pink and fluffy about driving up performance within a business. If every single person improves their performance levels and their productivity a little bit, the impact on the bottom line is significant. It is very much linked to strategy. It's linked to, you know, everything that particularly in a service-based business, if the people are underperforming, if they're not motivated, they don't have the right skills, that has a significant impact right across the board, and directly impacts the work you do with clients and your bottom line.
Even down to your front desk, whoever's on the front desk, if they're down, they're not smiling at people that come in, they're not smiling when they answer the phone, and it sounds silly, but you can't tell those things, can't you?
You do.
Everyone spoke to someone and went, "Are you all right?" You don't say it, and you can tell. I can see how that would matter. What you've said there about having the conversation, and there's often, so there'll be people out there who think, well, I did address this, I thought we'd nailed it, where did I go wrong? And there's something called like feedback filters, isn't there? Where your mind just does things that you might not appreciate.
Absolutely. So a lot of the work we look at is sort of around your subconscious versus your conscious mind, and so there's two sides. So your subconscious is the stuff that you do without filtering it, and you don't really know you're doing it, and you've had years and years since you were born of building subconscious filters and habits. So your conscious mind is the thing that then the other side, it filters things. So it will say things like, you know, it basically cross-checks the facts and tells you not to be silly, or you're overthinking this, or that's not actually true, or that didn't actually happen. So when you give feedback, so say you're managing someone and you want to give feedback, you want them to receive it in the best way possible.
Yeah.
And you also want them to be able to give it to you in the best way possible. So the first thing you've got to do is not make it, you've got to make it a safe environment to be able to do that, but also create a culture in a business where it's expected. So
it's not like, we can have a word with this, like, well, yeah, because we have a word a lot. We give each other feedback. Yeah. It should be a normal thing to happen, shouldn't it?
Yeah.
Not just like once a year.
In an appraisal.
End of year appraisal.
Yeah.
Where you've saved up like 42 notes of like, you were late on the 3rd week in July last year.
Absolutely. I think you remember I call it a blind spot. So it's the bit that you can't see. So it's the bit like, so for example, if you give me a piece of positive but potentially critical feedback, but you did it in a positive way, and you told me something I would maybe never recognise because it's here, it's in my blind spot, I can't see it. And for me, that's the biggest gift you can give to someone, because they then have a choice of whether they do something about it. Now, in performance management terms, that applies across the board, but in performance management terms, someone, if they're continually, for example, we'll take a soft skill, they're coming in every day and they're bringing in negative energy, they potentially don't know the impact that's having on the rest of the people around them. Now, when you give feedback about someone from a behavioural standpoint, it's much more difficult than a skills. Because the skills you can say, listen,
you say that was wrong, it's black and white, it was wrong, or you seem a bit grumpy.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that's almost like, well, that's what you think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's difficult, and people will take it more personally more often than enough. But the blind spot bit is like, if you can create a culture where people are open to it and they want the feedback, which is what we're doing with Robson Naylor, we're creating that environment where it is anybody can give critical feedback, or anybody, it's just got to be done in a positive way where the intention is really good. So the intention is, I'm telling you this so that you can then improve, or you can do something about it, we can change, or I can help you with that area. So yeah, that feedback stuff is really important. And the subconscious stuff is, I mean, for those for those watching, you might want to write this down, because there's 3 subconscious filters that you will filter information, and these are things that you can watch out for. We do it subconsciously, we don't know we're doing it. So you might think, well, really, but...
And this is why we could have the same conversation, then at the end, go away with different plans, different ideas, different targets.
Yeah.
And then when we come back and meet, we go, well, I thought I was doing this, and I thought this is what we agreed. And everyone knows, not meant to say everyone, like, but we've all had experience of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you think about it, so there's 3. The first one is generalization. It's where you will generalize the stuff that you're hearing. So you say you're speaking to me, Martin, I will take that information in, and then I'll maybe make it mean something else. So I'll potentially say, well, that always happens to me. Every time we meet, you say that, or I never seem to get it right.
Oh, I've never done that.
I've never done it. So these are things that, like, these are the 3 words to watch out for: always, never, and every time. As the performance manager, if you're using those words, it's not great, because...
Yeah, because I say you're always late. Well, as a fact, you're probably not always late. You might be late often.
More often than, yeah.
Yeah, but not always. And then I presume, do you go just straight into like a self-defence mode there? Well, I'm not always late.
Yeah.
So either just shut us down, I'm not listening.
Yeah. Or what can happen is, on the other receiving end, you make it mean that, even if you didn't say always, he says I'm always late. So you filter the information you're hearing and you make it mean something else. And then your narrative is whatever you tell yourself. So that narrative is I'm always late, I'm never getting it right, or like he's always having a go at me, I'm never the one that gets the pay rise. Like whatever that narrative is, and you then, that's your reality, because that's what you see.
This is disruptive on both sides then, isn't it? Because if I'm telling myself and using the word that you're always late, I don't know if you're a late person or
I'm
not.
I was on time today.
You're not normally late for when we have sessions. But if I'm telling myself internally that you're always late, I'm not going to cut you the slack that I might if you're just sometimes late.
Yeah.
I'm going to treat you worse. Does that make sense? I'll be more grumpy on the times when you are late because I think you're always late.
Yeah.
And also on your side, you'll think, well, he just thinks I'm always late, so I may as well be.
Yeah.
Or so it's actually it's on the giver and the receiver, isn't it, where it's disruptive.
Absolutely. So that generalisation, and you'll have a favourite out of the three. We all do all three, but you will have a favourite. Yeah. So it's generalisation. It's where you generalise, you overgeneralise, and it's not usually factual. So change those words to, quite frequently you are, or more often than enough, or sometimes I feel. So you really, and making sure that you're filtering that information with those words. Yeah. The second one is distortion. That is where you give me the information and I distort it to make it mean either something more positive so that it's easier for me to accept, or something more negative. And it does depend on your behavioural stance.
So is this, we've all probably heard the phrase of a shit sandwich, but you forget, you take the two positives and forget the negative, or vice versa.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, nobody likes to receive a shit sandwich, but this is an old-fashioned scenario. That
I don't mind making them for other people, but yeah, you don't like them.
I mean, I prefer cheese and ham, but that feedback piece is like someone who's maybe more glass half full, they might get rid of the negative and make it more positive, or vice versa.
You really said get rid of the shit there. This is an adult conversation, so that's fine.
But yeah, so it's almost like that distortion. You distort it. Now there's a bit of self-preservation there. Sometimes people distort things to make it feel more comfortable for them to sit with.
Of course, yeah.
So that's okay, but sometimes a little bit of that's okay. But even when we deliver training, people will distort some of the information in, and they'll ask a question back and you think, wow, that's not what I said, but they've distorted the information.
Do you think some of that might come from they've misunderstood rather than subconsciously distorted? Because we didn't say at the start yet, try to be as clear as possible on the actual thing you're trying to say. So we're assuming here that we're all saying something that's clear and then it's been distorted. We should stress that people might just not understand.
Oh, absolutely. These are
try to be understood first.
Well, yeah, there will be times where people are asking a question just because they haven't understood, but sometimes they'll verbatim repeat something different back to you that you've said. They'll say it differently. Right. And literally,
so what you're saying is, well, no, that's not what I said at all. Yeah.
But you're doing it subconsciously. The intention is never, very rarely bad.
They're not just always trying to catch you out.
Absolutely not. No. So that's just.
And actually, we saw this in the session we had. There was someone who said, "Oh, and is that what you mean?" No, actually, that isn't what. Yeah, that actually happened during our session, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. And you just reframe it back. So if someone does distort, you say, actually, let's just go back so we're on the same page. We're hearing the same thing. Let's make sure we really are on the same page. We're hearing. So that's the distortion. And the last one is deletion. Now, I usually make a joke about this isn't like selective hearing where you just.
I can't remember this part of this.
You deleted it. But yeah, where you delete it, and this is really great for things that are really traumatic in your life. Like I say, self-preservation. People do delete and put it away somewhere. So there are some very
survival tactic, isn't it?
Our body is an amazing thing. Our mind is an amazing thing. So we'll do that. But sometimes you can delete huge pieces. So I don't know if you've ever had this, where you've done a performance review or you've had a conversation, a one-on-one, and you come back a month later and you end up having the same conversation. And you think, we discussed this the last time. Sometimes people genuinely delete stuff. And if it's a long session or a long conversation, which is very complex, you'll have this with clients, they will only be able to absorb a certain amount of information. So again, this isn't bad intention. More often than enough, it's just the way our minds work.
Yeah.
So
what, are they just full? Is that what you mean?
Sometimes they're full, sometimes they don't like it, so they delete it.
I was going to say, it's not just always preservation. I presume there's maybe subconscious, but there's still almost a choice to, well, I didn't like that, I'll get rid of it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And remember, if we refer it back to feedback, sometimes you're receiving stuff you're not ready to hear, or you don't want to hear. Sometimes
which is why it's important to be in an environment where feedback is regular and done constructively.
Absolutely.
So if it's the first time you've had someone give you proper feedback, it will be a shock to the system, and you're probably going to do some of these things, aren't you?
It can be. So that's why it's really important to, at the end of a feedback session or one-on-one, that you actually look back and you recap the conversations and you ask them to reaffirm, is that your version of events? Or sometimes what I'll do is I'll say, just repeat back to me what we've just discussed there so I'm clear, and I'll get them to reaffirm it verbally, and then that way, and I can watch the body language to make sure that they're, they're nodding and they're saying yes and they've got it, and then, you go away with, and our written actions are great, but you go away with the same feedback and you're clear.
Yeah.
So,
I sometimes say that internally. I say, right, so what we're doing then?
You do. I
debrief and I go, so what we're doing then? And it's just to make sure. It's just, It's mainly because I know that I'm guilty of some of these things.
But
so I just want to make
are.
sure we're on the same page.
And that probably I just want to reiterate that these are subconscious filters. You don't know you're doing it, and nobody does not do them. So this is just like, the more insight you have on this kind of thing, the better you can be as a manager.
Make it less defensive as well if someone says, well, we definitely talked about this.
Yeah.
Like, well, maybe we did actually.
Yeah.
Rather than have a massive row about whether it's like, okay, well, maybe you did, let's move on. I'm listening this time, I've got it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Don't let my wife know that though.
No, but no, mum's the word.
Because I always listen to everything and
Obviously.
she never has to repeat anything. So let's assume that we've figured out why people aren't motivated. It could be that they can't do something, there's a skills gap, it might be a mood or a motivational thing, they just don't want to do it. We've given them feedback, that's great. What's the danger if you don't give that feedback in a timely fashion though, Sarah? So because the next thing you want to go on to is CPR, which is something you covered briefly when we met. And it's about how to bring life back into a tarnished relationship, I suppose. And this can happen if you don't give feedback when you need to.
Yeah.
It becomes a big thing, doesn't it?
Oh, it can. So it's actually, just to be super clear, this is a tool, and it's a really simple one that I use, and I know you've been using it since regularly. It's actually to avoid you getting to the point where the relationship gets tarnished.
It's more about being aware of the journey to a tarnished relationship.
Absolutely. That's absolutely it. So it's like, how do we make sure that we're having tricky, often people call them difficult conversations, but sometimes it's not useful to use the word difficult because you then frame them up as difficult, but tricky or conversations that maybe make you both feel a bit uncomfortable, or you're worried about the impact it's going to have on the other person, or you're worried that it's going to drive conflict. So this little model, if you are listening and you want to listen again, I'll write it down, but it's called the CPR model. And I'm just going to talk you through the 3 steps. So the first step is, so this is about when and what to focus on when you have a difficult conversation. Yeah. So if we were going to be discussing a topic that was tricky, and
well, it's just too late. I was late today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for example,
let's just call it there.
Yeah. So it's a simple example, but say for example you were late. I, as your manager, would be better off having a conversation with you at content stage. So C stands for content. That is where you have the conversation really early on. So it might be 1 or 2 times. And you just say, oh, I've noticed you were late. Is there something going on? Like, how can we prevent that from happening moving forward? Notice I did not use the word why. I didn't say, Martin, why were you late?
And this is important, actually. We can come back on that if we need to, because that is important, the why rather than how can we stop.
Yeah. How and the what. Yeah. So ideally you want to ask sort of more of the coaching open style questions, how and what. So how can we prevent that from happening? Is there something going on I need to know about?
What do we need to do?
Yeah, I'm having the conversation at content stage, and I'm having the conversation about the content, you being late. I don't talk about anything else, just that.
You don't roll it in, you are late, you're always on your phone, and the way you talked to that client yesterday, while I'm on it,
you talk about the
just the thing that happened.
Yeah.
Just as it happens.
As it happens, the more time the better. Now this little model got me to have conversations way earlier than I used to, because I used to think, well, it's trivial, I don't need to. Now sometimes you don't, it depends, pick your battles.
It's not everything every time.
Yeah, it's not. But if it's something that is actually causing an issue or having a negative impact, you need to have the conversation. If, for example, you then continue to be late, it then becomes a pattern, which is what the P stands for. I then pull you in and have the conversation about the pattern, not the content. So I would say to you, Martin, we had this conversation, it's now become a reoccurring theme, it's become a pattern. Yeah. We really need to nip this in the bud now, because we can't have that happening on a reoccurring basis. And I just stick to that bit, and I talk to you like it's reoccurring, I've noticed.
And the point is, if you've expressed the dissatisfaction at the time it happens, the first 2 or 3 times, it shouldn't be a surprise that you're having a conversation about a repeated issue.
Yeah, no.
And less likely to get into a pattern because you've expressed it when you should have done.
That's exactly it. So
it's very hard if you just start this whole thing at the pattern stage. You go, well, actually, they've always been late, but I've never mentioned it.
There you go.
And people get that is a tricky conversation, isn't
people then get defensive. They're like, you've never mentioned it before. My 5 minutes late, I didn't realise it bothered you.
I presumed it was all right.
As an example, yeah. So the final stage, and I'll loop back, but the final stage is the R, which stands for relationship, and that's the bit where you being late is now starting to impact our relationship, because I feel like I can't trust you to be on time for clients. If I say I need you somewhere, that you'll turn up on time. So actually, it's hit a relationship piece. So I would then pull you in. I wouldn't talk about the C, I wouldn't talk about the P, I'd talk about the R. And this is really important because often people don't. They stew and then they don't let the other person know how it's making them feel.
Right.
So when you linguistically have the conversation, you need to say, this has become like an issue for me. And to be honest with you, I don't want this to impact our relationship. But if we don't address it now, it will. So
if this is an employee and employer scenario, what you're inferring there is, I can't employ someone who is going to have this.
Well, they're already employed, so you couldn't...
Sorry, but you say, like, I can't continue to employ someone who I can't trust in this way because of this issue. Is that... Ideally what... Without saying, sorted or you're sacked. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, what you would say is like, I never wanted to get to that point. So although at this point you're having it so it doesn't impact... It hasn't already got to that point. It hasn't
broke the relationship.
No.
It's impacting but not broken.
There you go, absolutely. So you need to be clear about that, because if we were to put the context of a client, you would say to a client, you're always asking us for things last minute, as an example. You've had the conversation at content, listen, you're asking for this last minute, I can do it this time but not again.
Yeah.
You're asking for this stuff last minute. Every time it's a pattern. It gets to the point where it's hitting the relationship, you would say, listen, I want to do the best job I can for you. I never want to feel like we can't maintain a great relationship. Yeah. So we really need to address this, because the last thing I want is for our relationship to be impacted. You have the conversation before it's too late. Yeah. Now, sometimes what people typically do is they don't have a conversation at C, they don't have the conversation at P, they wait until they've made it so big, and sometimes it wasn't even big in the first instance, and then that already worked up and feel like they don't trust this person, or this person's disrespecting them, they're disrespecting my time. They've made it so big that when they have the conversation, it's a difficult conversation because you've left it so late.
And they actually have a barney.
And they end up potentially in conflict, for sure.
Yeah.
So the CPR model is a really good cross-check, so to make you intervene your thoughts and know, this is timely, I need to have it at C. Okay, now I need to have a conversation at P, and now I need to talk about the R, the relationship. Ideally, the C should interrupt so you don't get to the P or the R. But
there should be more C's than there should ever be P's and R's.
Yeah. But you know, sometimes this does happen with staff. Really,
the best will in the world, you might have someone stubborn who just will not do what you ask them.
And sometimes it's the judgment piece around, like, from a performance management perspective, you've got to pick the topics you're talking about. You don't want to be doing this about everything. And the lateness is a funny example, because sometimes if people are late a few times, you'd let it go, but not if they were like really late and it was impacting the team and the clients or whatever.
If they're holding other people up or they're late for a scheduled meeting, or but if they're 5 minutes late and they always work 5 minutes extra, you might we're not. I was just using that as an example. But pick the important things that you don't want to.
Missing deadlines is another good one. Like, if someone is missing a deadline, you know, and that is underperformance, and that has a knock-on effect to the rest of the team, or someone who's got to, in this business, often you're passing the baton to someone else, it impacts them and what they do next. So having that conversation at content is saying, I know it's only been once, but we need to make sure, like, this doesn't become a pattern. Or it might have happened twice and you have the conversation at C. But if it's reoccurring, you need to have it. And get into the skin of, like, what's the root cause? Like, not the surface level stuff, the root cause. What's the root cause of you missing the deadline?
So we've got can't and won't, we've sorted that. We've got the filters, which we know most people will have at least one of those filters playing quite a lot. We know that to try and resolve some of these things, we need to give timely feedback. We can use CPR as a simple acronym to remember.
and you mentioned earlier, it's important that you don't say, why were you late?
Yeah, the
So
why.
so how do we approach the content then?
Okay.
So how do we make sure that we don't blow that up there? Because if you get that wrong, you can go straight to relationship issues.
Yeah, absolutely. So we say why is a little word, but it has a huge impact. And there'll be people listening going...
Why do you say that?
there'll be people saying, well, you need to ask questions. You absolutely need to ask questions, but not leading with the word why. Because, and there's the 5 Why book. There's all kinds of books that talk about the word why.
Why is a useful tool when you're not in a position where there's a possible confrontational side to it? Because why could almost feel like an accusation, can't it?
That's it.
Why do you want that? Starts with why, but it's not an accusation. Why were you late?
It's really difficult to not feel. What tends to happen is you retrieve information from the past when someone asks you why. So if I said to you, why did you miss this deadline, Martin? You will go backwards in your mind and start retrieving all the reasons as to why you missed the deadline. I want you not to miss the deadline moving forward. So it's more...
The next deadline is the most important one, isn't it?
So I want you to learn from that, but I don't want you to feel like defensive, because as soon as you get your heckles up or you start getting defensive, your adrenaline kicks in, you start to have a really unproductive conversation.
Because also, why did you miss that deadline? Well, it wasn't my fault, it was Betty in payroll, and then James down the road, well, he didn't do that thing, and then, well, what was I supposed to do there?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you could just change it to ask a how or a what question. So how can we prevent this from happening again? You will go forward in your mind. You will go, right, I need to think about the future. So, and you start to plan moving forward, and it also opens the conversation up for like productive movement forward. I'm not going to do that again. This is what I'm going to do in the future. That's how we want a conversation to feel. We want them to feel progressive and forward and not dwelling on the past. Now, that doesn't mean you can't reference a past and say, we missed a deadline.
Because you need to figure out what went wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
You still need to know what went wrong, but you do it in a preventative future thinking rather than a blame past.
Absolutely. And it's all in the language. Obviously, the work that Duo do, we focus on sort of behaviour, and that links with sort of what you say and what your body language does. And language is so critical to how you communicate. And all we're looking for with every interaction is a win-win interaction.
Yeah.
A win for the manager, a win for the person, or a win for the client, a win. You want it to be a win-win. More often than enough, people go in, they see it at different levels.
They want the last word, don't they?
Or it's a win for one,
like,
not for the other.
I showed them.
Yeah. Oh, I really grilled them. And
rather than we helped each other.
Yeah. And ultimately, it's about being outcome focused. What outcome do we want to get to? Well, we want you to stop missing the deadlines and exceeding expectations. Yeah. So, as a collective, we get where we need to go.
Is it worth, just as a final part and comment then, Sarah, just I think a lot of leaders, so whether you're a manager or just a supervisor, a senior, a trainer, or to a trainee, whatever the title is, it doesn't matter here. But if you're above someone in any hierarchy, I think a lot of people almost forget that actually the leader's role is to facilitate their team, isn't it? Yeah. It's to help their team perform. It's not a selfish thing, this, is it? It's like you're almost serving your team. And that's the better way to lead, isn't it?
Well, there's many different definitions of a good leader, and some can be a little bit more dictatorial in approach. And there is a time, I believe, for when a leader needs to be really decisive and spell things out and be quite sort of black and white. But if we're talking about someone who wants a group of people to follow and wants to instill people and empower them so that they can sort of progress their own journey, so they don't have to have someone doing everything for them, then this approach is really, it's about going in and having equal conversations. They tend to get better outcomes.
Yeah.
Someone coming in and making someone feel really, really bad about themselves, about the fact they're underperforming, doesn't generally.
They're not going to come in skipping the next day.
It doesn't generally. Yeah. I mean, sometimes you have to have the hard conversation.
Oh yeah, I mean you're there to facilitate or help your team achieve their goals. I don't mean do it for them. No. Mm-hmm. You've still got to sort out weaknesses in the team, or weaknesses in approach, behaviour, process, all of those things. So yeah, but if you see is, your success is your team's success,
Absolutely.
why would you not want to improve your team and
Yeah.
make them perform better?
And more often than enough, it's not because people don't want to do it. It's often a question of time and resource because everybody's so busy. So they'll push the one-to-one, they'll push the difficult conversation,
Yeah.
they'll move it and put a client meeting in place. But creating a good culture in a business, making time for performance management and creating an environment where people want to grow and learn can have such a significant impact, and most of that is done through effective communication.
Yeah.
So investing in that, practicing it, upskilling your managers and leaders, and it also allowing the rest of the team insight into this stuff so they can they can take the feedback, they want it and they want to excel. It drives, your best performers in the business should be able to pull up your underperformers. It's not the job of the manager to do that.
Yeah.
It's that everybody
if everyone is comfortable having an open discussion with everybody else about anything, it doesn't all fall to one person, does it?
Absolutely.
Because a team will self-regulate in the ideal world.
Yeah. And just to close, the ultimate aim is to drive up performance. People feel great when they're performing. People, businesses feel great when they're performing collectively.
Yeah.
And motivation levels are infectious. It has a knock-on effect all the way through the business. So, in really putting some time into this subject, it has a huge impact across the whole of the business and your client delivery, your customer experience. It all sort of feeds into that top level strategy.
A lot of people. So I'm a fairly simple lad of old, probably 20 years ago I would have saw this as time out of work, rather than time. This is definitely work. This isn't, you're not skiving if you're doing a couple of hours of this to upskill yourself. The payback on this can be many-fold, can't it?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed that. We'll link to Sarah in the comments. Please do let us have your feedback. As always, reach out. You can email us, comment below, give us a review on whichever medium you're listening to, watching this, and look out for the next episode. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.